We've got some changes this week in our updated college football playoff rankings, and really when we get to week 8, there are a couple of games that I've got my eye on that I want to see how those games play out, and then I think I'm going to feel pretty good about these predictions. At this point, again, we're still moving into week 8, a lot of unknowns, and just seeing, there are some big games coming up that I think are going to have a huge impact on the playoff race. Where, yeah, we've had those already, but maybe, like, for example, Ohio State, Oregon, that game really doesn't mean a whole lot. Those teams very likely to play again in the Big Ten Championship, and the winner of that game, will get a top 4 seed. So, there have been some consequential games for sure, but I think these next couple of weeks are really, really going to tell us a lot about the playoff picture. But here are my updated predictions, and we'll start with the number 1 seed. Speaking of Oregon, Ohio State, I've got Ohio State winning a rematch against Oregon in the Big Ten Championship. I think they win out, but that Penn State game is going to be tricky. They play them on the road. If they lose that game, Ohio State's not going to get to the Big Ten Championship, in my opinion. So that is a huge game. It would pretty much lock in Penn State and Oregon in the championship game. I think Ohio State still gets in the playoff, but you're talking about potentially a 9 or 10 seed instead of the 1 seed. So that's a huge game. And then I've got Texas as a 2 seed. So I think Texas is going to lose a game. I think they will win the SEC championship. And so then you look at Ohio State, Texas, you compare the resumes, pretty even. I think Ohio State's loss coming earlier in the year is going to ultimately be the reason why they're 1 and why Texas is 2. I think Texas might actually lose to Texas A&M in the regular season. That's just going to be such a huge game, rivalry game. Texas A&M is going to be so fired up for that game. I actually think the Aggies might win that game, and that could be Texas' only loss. And then potentially Texas wins in a rematch the next week against Texas A&M in the SEC championship. So that's something to watch for. Number 3 seed, Miami. Haven't really made a change here. I think Clemson has looked like the better team, but I've just seen Miami when they have played at their best. And when they play at their best, I think they're a top 5 team. They haven't done it consistently. Clemson's been much more consistent. But if they bring it, I think this team can beat almost anyone, maybe even beat anyone on any given day. No, I don't think they're the best team, but I think they could win a game. And so Miami at number 3, I still have them beating Clemson in the ACC Championship, although I'm starting to feel more like Clemson might win that game. But yeah, we'll see. Number 4 for me is Kansas State. So I've made a change here. I think Kansas State's the team to beat in the Big 12 now. I know they've got the 1 loss. They didn't play well against BYU, but I think they probably finish 10-2, maybe lose 1 more game, win the Big 12 championship against maybe Iowa State. That's just kind of how I'm looking at it right now. But I think Kansas State gets in as the 4 seed. I still think these Big 12 teams are going to beat up on each other. And so then the other at-large team, that's going to be number 12, Boise State. I've been sticking with them now for a while. I just don't know if anybody can beat this team in the Mountain West. So I think Boise State gets to number 12. And again, they have that great loss. I say great loss. Their loss came to a great team in Oregon. So I think they're in great shape. Even if they lose a regular season game, as long as they win the Mountain West, I think there's a really good shot that they get to number 12 and lose another regular season game. All right, let's get to the at-large teams. I've got Oregon at number 5. I think this team has a really good shot of running the table the rest of the regular season, losing to Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship, or even maybe getting in there with 1 loss and losing. I still think Oregon probably finishes number 5. And then I think Penn State actually gets number 6. So you're talking about 3 Big Ten teams in the top 6. And Kansas State and Miami might be ranked even lower if you look at just rankings, because I do think Miami's going to lose. They can't keep playing the way they're playing. I think they slip up maybe against Louisville this weekend or maybe against Georgia Tech, but I think they're going to lose a game. But yeah, Penn State at number 6. I think they lose to Ohio State but probably beat everyone else, and so 11-1 gets them up to number 6. And you might, if Oregon loses a regular season game, you might see Penn State at 5, Oregon at 6. And I think that would be better, at least, to get Penn State, Boise State instead of a rematch. But that's the way I see it playing out right now. Number 7, Georgia. I think Georgia loses to Texas this weekend, or maybe somewhere else, maybe even Ole Miss. But I think that's only one more loss for this team. I think they finished 10-2. That's enough to get them up to number 7. Number 18 is Clemson. I'm sticking with my prediction here. I think they win out in the regular season. They do have some challenging games coming up. Pittsburgh Virginia Tech, those won't be easy wins, but South Carolina at the end of the season. Again, the schedule is going to get tougher for Clemson, but I think they manage those games. They get through them. They finish undefeated in the regular season, but then lose to Miami in the ACC Championship. Could also see them maybe slipping up and losing a game, but then beating Miami in the ACC Championship. And we also have to keep an eye on SMU. SMU is creeping into this discussion in the ACC as well, and Pittsburgh, although I think Pittsburgh probably loses at least a couple of games when you look at their schedule. So Clemson at number 8. Number 9 for me is Tennessee, and this really comes down to this weekend. I talk about 2 big games this weekend. Alabama, Tennessee, LSU, Arkansas. Those are the games to watch for the playoff race in the SEC. If Tennessee beats Alabama, I think they lose to Georgia, but beat everyone else. And so they finish 10-2, and that's enough to get them into the playoff. If Alabama wins, I think Alabama, and I said this maybe at the beginning of the season. I said that Alabama, Tennessee, that game, the winner would make the playoff, the loser would be left out, and I still believe that. I'm leaning towards Tennessee in that game right now, but it could really go either way. So yeah, if Alabama beats Tennessee, I think Alabama is in, Tennessee is out, because I don't think Tennessee is going to beat Georgia on the road. So that is a huge game. The other game I'm looking at is LSU, Arkansas. If LSU beats Arkansas, I think the Tigers might be in the playoff. I'm going to hold off for now on putting them in here because they do still, even after that game, have Alabama and, of course, the road game against Texas A&M. I think they probably beat Alabama, though. That's why I think Alabama needs to beat Tennessee, because if they lose to LSU, they can't lose to Tennessee and LSU and get in unless we see chaos. So Tennessee at number 9. Begin. Watch Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, Arkansas. I think it's an elimination game for Alabama and Tennessee, and I think it's an elimination game for LSU, because I think if they lose that game, they're not going to get in. But if they win that game, I think they will be in. And again, our video will change next week based off of those results. All right, number 10, Notre Dame. You look at the rest of the season, they're going to be favored in every game. Maybe they slip up somewhere and lose, but I still think even at 10-2, because of the way this season has gone, I think at 10-2, Notre Dame probably still gets in. I just don't think there's going to be a ton of 10-2 teams. I don't know that we'll see any 10-2 teams left out. And then I've got Texas A&M at number 11. So I think they lose maybe somewhere during the rest of the season. They slip up, get upset against, I can't remember who they play. Maybe at South Carolina, at Auburn. Maybe they slip up in one of those games. And I think they beat Texas, and then they lose in a rematch in the SEC Championship. And they have 3 losses, but a 10-2 regular season, I think, is still going to be enough to get them in. But the head-to-head loss to Notre Dame is going to be the difference in the 10 and 11 seeds. And I think that ultimately is going to be what gets Notre Dame in. I think if you switch their losses around, like they lost to Texas A&M and beat Northern Illinois, they might not get in. But I think having that win over Texas A&M is huge, because I think they're going to be ranked ahead of the Aggies. All right, so we're going to look. I'm not putting a ton of thought into these games. The games are, hypothetical. We don't know the actual matchup, so I'm not going to sit here and dissect these games. So just a quick run through. This is what I've been doing. I'd probably take Clemson at home against Tennessee to advance to play Ohio State. I'd take Oregon in a rematch with Boise State. I think Georgia at home, too much for Notre Dame. And then we get Penn State, Texas A&M. That would be a good one, but I'm going to go with Penn State at home. I think the home field advantage might be the difference there. Ohio State, Clemson, that should be a good one. We've seen them in the playoff before in the Rose Bowl. How about that? Ohio State, Clemson in the Rose Bowl. That would be very interesting, but I think Ohio State's a little too much. They win this game. Oregon over Kansas State fairly easily. Texas, Georgia for a rematch here. I think Texas beats them again. Georgia's got some question marks, and Texas is playing such good football. I would change my mind on this game after I see Saturday's game. Again, talk about consequences for the playoff. Texas, Georgia, another huge game in the playoff race, potentially for the SEC championship race. So I think both of those teams are going to get in, but if Georgia wins, maybe Texas doesn't make the SEC championship if they slip up and lose, let's say, to Texas A&M. So that's a huge game as well. Obviously, every game at this point is big, but the SEC definitely has some very important games this Saturday. Penn State, Miami. I'm going to go with Miami. I think, again, when this team is playing at their best, they're really, really good. And I think they'll be hyped up for this as a playoff game. I think they're able to get a win over Penn State. Ohio State, Oregon for the third time. This is the rubber match here. I'm going to go with the Buckeyes. Ohio State wins that one in the Cotton Bowl. And then Texas, Miami in the Orange Bowl. Perhaps an advantage for the Hurricanes playing in Florida. Not going to matter, though. Texas, too good. And we get Ohio State, Texas in the national championship. So I've changed my pick up here. I think I've had Ohio State, Georgia throughout the season when I've done these videos. But I'm going to go Buckeyes and the Longhorns here. But again, I know Ohio State just lost to Oregon, but I didn't see anything that made me think they couldn't win a national championship. They had a chance to win that game on the road. It's a game that I picked them to lose in the regular season, or in my preseason predictions. I had them losing that game, then winning in the Big Ten championship and winning the national championship. I'm sticking with that prediction for now, and I'm going with the Buckeyes. Now, Texas beats Georgia by 30. And they really look like it's the team that's going to do it. Maybe I change my opinion next week, but for now, again, I'm sticking with Ohio State. No reason to change my prediction at this point. We're not going to be going back and forth on teams, trying to stay, consistent. It worked last year with Michigan, and we're doing it this year with Ohio State. So those are my updated college football playoff predictions. Give me your predictions down in the comments below.